Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Pre-Production. I am so happy you're here this week. Thank you so much for listening. I am super excited to be talking to a filmmaking team that has made one of my favorite movies of 2024. It's an original film called Caddo Lake, which is right now streaming on Max. It was produced by M. Night Shyamalan and directed and written by Celine and Logan George. Thank you so much for coming to the podcast, guys.
We're so excited to be here.
Us.
Well, honestly, genuinely, like the first time I saw the movie, I was sent a link, and it was like, pre-embargo, so nobody's talking about the movie. There's nothing about it out there. The trailers are purposely very vague. For those who have not seen the movie, there will be some spoilers discussed later on this podcast, and so I strongly suggest that you watch the film first, because it's the type of movie that can really wash over you if you know nothing about it. And I think that's the best way going in. Don't even read headlines about it, because it's so easy to spoil, in a headline, the fun of the movie. Just go watch it. It's really good. I'm a huge M. Night Shyamalan fan. He is the reason that I made movies. He's the reason I got into movies when I was 14. My listeners and viewers have heard this 1,000 times, and they're like, "Shut the fuck up, Chris." I spoke signs, and it genuinely made me want to make movies. I asked my mom what that means. What are all these job titles? What is this world? How do I get into this? Got a camcorder, started making movies. So I watched your film because his name was on it. And I also love Dylan O'Brien, and I think he's just incredible. As the movie progressed, I was like, this is really interesting, and I'm actually into this. Once things start happening, I couldn't just contain my excitement for how well you guys put this story together. And on second viewing, my appreciation just grew even more, because you start seeing things beforehand that fit into the puzzle. And it's just the type of script that I envy. As soon as I saw it, I was like, fuck, that is really great idea. And the construction of it is so well done. So I just want to give you all that praise and tell you, right up the bat, before we get into anything, thank you for making it. It's fucking great.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
You had the perfect viewing experience that we wish everyone could go into with it. It's not a real thing, because we understand now, especially having gone through this experience, that you have to have something that, engages a viewer before they're sitting down to watch it. And it's something that we always struggled with in this film, actually, is that it's something that Night actually taught us, this idea of there being a cards up and a cards down to be experienced. The cards up, I see dead people. The cards down,
Spoilers.
Bruce Willis is dead. There's revelations and twists to be had, but you have to have a hook to get an audience excited. And Caddo is really just tone, for all intents and purposes, until you understand, you're saying, the puzzle that's in play.
When I was watching it initially, as it went on, my number one thought in the back of my head was how are these two stories going to intersect? Dylan O'Brien's and Eliza Scanlon. When will they meet? And I absolutely was not looking at the change of lighting between the two. I was not looking at the change of subtle things, when they speed underneath that sort of decrepit, rusty area that he's just going right underneath, and she's having to move things to get under. I wasn't paying attention to any of that. It was just kind of just in the back of my mind. There's a line in the movie too where Dylan O'Brien mentions he was like, "Oh, I forgot about that thing that happened in '99." Yeah. And on second viewing, I was like, wow, I don't know if I would have put that in, because that's a risk to be yes, this clearly 30-year-old man is somehow remembering something that apparently happened when he was maybe 5. And so, but it's you're not thinking of it in that way. It's just sort of oh, he has a really good memory. It didn't, it's really smart. It's just so well constructed. First off, I guess let's just take you back for both of you to where you discovered your love of movies, and where that became something that was attainable maybe as a goal, because this always fascinates me, the idea of where'd that first domino topple, where you both thought, oh, okay, film.
we both wanted to be actors. We met at NYU. We both have degrees in drama. But even now, it doesn't feel like filmmaking's an actual career. I don't know if I ever actually had that thought of like, oh, we could make money doing this. The first film I really fell in love with was Dog Day Afternoon. But I think that was more from like it felt like it could almost be a play. Let's talk about well constructed. It's so well constructed and really taking place only inside the bank. And Al Pacino's performance and just all the performances in that film were really stuck out to me and spoke to me in a way where I felt like watching a movie could be an experience where you feel like you can suspend your disbelief even more than I don't know. I just didn't. I love my parents very much, but they did not give me the have me watch all the films that I should have watched growing up. So Dog Day Afternoon, I watched in college and kind of had that moment where I thought, wow, film is very cool. For you, it was very different.
Well, I grew up watching lots of movies. I'm like the youngest of three, so I think I was exposed to really like adult, mature films. And as the young, and I would like watching Die Hard way too early and stuff like that. But I think my like first love was the Lord of the Rings movies. I've watched them, especially Fellowship, probably over 40 times. Like I was really just totally taken by it. And a trail, it's like Two Towers. It's like 20 times. Return of the King, like maybe 15. Fellowship of the Ring is a near perfect film in my eyes. And I've watched it many times in the theater. There was a moment of watching in the theater where I actually physically stood up out of my seat as a 11-year-old, I guess, and was like, yeah, it's like when they're in Khazad-dûm or something. And so just to say that, like, I think feeling that sensation or like my memory of that memory is basically what I'm always searching for, I guess, in terms of like what we write or the stories we want to tell. It's something that's so propulsive and so engaging that you
lose yourself.
Yeah, and that's the sensation of what you're watching takes over. But yeah, that translated into acting for both of us into college. And
I do just want to point out, I know your listeners will be listening.
Yeah.
But these are all movie tickets behind us. And the first on board is Fellowship.
Oh my God. I feel like I am meeting long lost cousins or something. I have right next to me a binder filled with my movie ticket stubs all the way back from 2001.
Yes, 2001. Yeah, that's so cool.
Yeah, I started saving back then. I don't have Fellowship, but I do have Two Towers and Return of the King. But my first ticket stub is for the Guy Pearce movie, The Time Machine from 2000. What? It's kind of important for me to have like these physical memories of things that allow me to, in a tangible way, relate to something that was very important to me. And a very strange thing happened when I began looking at all those ticket stubs. I realized that I had like a visual of where I was in the theater when I saw it for every single one of them and who I was with. And it's such like an important thing to sort of house those memories.
Yeah. I mean,
we're still saving too.
Yeah, there's two others of similar size that are on this side of the wall. Yeah, I used to just keep them in a tin box and then decided to sort of showcase them because it's so much, and it's in chronological order. So you can see it was like 850. It's epic. Yeah. Again, 2000s, really something. Now you have to ask them to print the ticket because it's like I could all digital if you don't know your way around it.
I had the same. There's a local Regal I go to, and the manager knows me like really well because every time I'm there, I'm like, don't forget to print the ticket.
Yeah, exactly. No, it is true about that. I think remembering sort of where you were in physical space in the theater. Certainly, some of my most memorable theatrical experiences. You kind of, you remember how many people were in the theater too. Like,
remember Wild Tales we saw?
Oh my God, yeah,
that was one of our best theatrical experiences together. It was an empty theater and we saw this the little film Wild Tales. I don't know if you've seen it. It's this collection of short stories.
Very, very good. Yeah.
And yeah, that was fun. That was when we were making short films, and at that point we were like, why instead of making a feature, let's just put all our short films together.
Yes, that was the hope. We love short films and wish that they were financially like, I don't know, like lucrative. Yeah, that it was like a financially viable thing. But I mean, just to close our loop on how we went off, like post-college, we had little very unfulfilling, acting careers as like complete nobodies. And I think just found our way back to each other because Celine you've always been like more of a writer than me in so many ways. And Celine was just you were writing a feature, into the void in so many ways just because you wanted to.
Yeah. Just to get this out of the way, we're obviously also in a relationship. We're married.
Yes.
And so when we first got together in college, I always felt like Logan was the most talented actor that one of the most talented people I'd ever had the pleasure of working beside. We broke up. It was super dramatic. And in that time of like trying to find ourselves, I started to write a feature. And when we reconnected and we didn't speak for that time. And I thought about Logan every day. And
same. It was very much like we would have been the ones that got away if we hadn't come back to each other. Celine shared the script with me, and
he rewrote the first 10 pages without asking me, and it was much better. And I had
it was a really amazing. I was like, I can't believe you wrote this. Though, 'cause this like super compelling story, and something I've never seen before.
Yeah.
A tunnel underneath New York City. This homeless population living underground in the streets of New York.
I had been doing work with the low-income housing, supportive housing units, and this story kind of came from a book I'd been reading at the time too, and it just came tumbling out of me. But Logan was able to take it in a very new, beautiful direction and find an ending that I was really struggling to find at the time. And we naively thought we could just find money. We sent it to a bunch of different places, just the script. No one got back to us. And so at that point, we decided that we had to prove that we could do it. So in order to do that, we decided we had to make a series of short films to prove that we could direct this.
Yeah.
So we ended up becoming a 2-person crew. We did a bunch of work.
We were also basically like, I was bartending and like Celine was babysitting at the time. So this was also like, we need to get out of our daily, like the morass of like, living in New York, and it was all great, but it was also like, what's the next tier? So we teamed up and did a lot of like really small commercial work as this 2-person crew where
self-taught from YouTube.
Yeah, just like the bare bones equipment of stuff and like, working for not a lot of money, but we had to sort of build up a little bit of a portfolio of work. And found this little, it was great. Celine.
Well, we started by finding the Shark Tank line of entrepreneurs. We went and asked if anybody would like a commercial for $1,000 to all these people auditioning for Shark Tank. Got one person free. Made a little commercial. We used that to write to a bunch of nonprofits and international schools because we wanted to travel too. And we got a few bites, made a few commercials for schools, and basically used that money. For the next 3 years, we did that. We daisy chained places that would hire us to make these little commercials.
Like Tokyo, Kathmandu,
it was
Abu Dhabi. Like it was very, yeah. It was a weird little thing we were able to tap into. I don't think it exists anymore.
We also Airbnb'd our apartment and slept on our roof and in diners. And we just did crazy stuff to try to make ends meet so we wouldn't have to do these jobs that were pulling everything out of us so we couldn't focus creatively at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So we just tried to spend as much time together developing our like vision, our style, in as much filmmaking as possible, and put all that money into a series of short films that we made over 2 years. And then we were able to get the money for our feature.
That is so do it yourself in every way. I mean, I've heard a lot of different types of stories about the DIY nature of filmmaking. And obviously it's something that I know that world too. But the idea of Airbnb-ing the house, sleeping on the roof, just, going out to people and pitching yourselves to them and, to make a commercial. I mean, this is what it takes, people. I mean, when you hear stories like this, it really is about the grind, the daily grind of just continuing to make things, to make connections, but to not stop shooting things and always finding ways to, in very unique ways, I have to say, of shooting things too. Like you said, you don't even know if that exists anymore, the specific sort of world you tapped into.
Well, I think we found more satisfaction in that than what is the daily grind of like being an actor and sort of being beholden, like you're sort of at the mercy of other projects that come your way. It was way more satisfying to feel like at least we're in control of our own destiny and that we can like wake up and be writing towards something or like making these things. And I think it took us like getting back together for that switch in our brain. like we cast ourselves in some of our first shorts, but it was really sort of out of necessity of like, we just really trusted each other as actors, and it was like one less person to pay. And or so, in the spirit of like how many hats we wore in those early days, because you're sort of producing it and you're the costume designer because you don't, or you're the set deck, you're just doing everything that you can. We edit all of our own stuff, so we kept it pretty small for the first, and luckily one of our shorts was sort of very tonally similar to this feature. But I guess the feature script was sort of the light at the end of the tunnel. It was like, how do we prove that we can make this?
But we depended on festivals, and I know a lot of the people you've spoken to, and you were talking about Knight earlier. Knight is a big non-festival guy, does not see the value in it, does not. When we were like, hey, Caddo, we should go to a festival, he was very much like, why? Festivals built, we got super lucky. We really didn't have any connections. And we just blindly submitted, and that film Logan's talking about got into Cannes, that short film. And that's how we were able, and then we've had a piece in Sundance, and that's how we were able to get the money for our first feature. And so it does feel like once you climb the ladder, then the ladder is just taken away. So like no one else can climb that same thing. These festivals are not even accepting some stuff that they wouldn't accept our films now necessarily. Everything changes year to year, and there's no like simple route. There's no easy way to do this. Everyone's path is vastly different.
So you get all this stuff, you make your first feature. What was the experience like making that? And forgive me, I haven't seen it, but I imagine that you went through a lot of struggles to get that off the ground and also to make it. What was that like to really just be on set making a movie and having no idea what's going to happen with it at the end of the day?
Oh, gosh. It's like I don't even want to revisit that in my soul because it was so much weight, like there's so much weight on this thing. Making movies so hard. There's so many, like Logan was saying with our shorts and with our like little 2-person, like the only people to blame are ourselves in those. We're the production designer. We're doing we're doing so much, but it's like when you're on set and if your prop person forgets that prop or like that's you're dependent on so many other people that coming from such an independent background, it was really intimidating.
I think that was probably the learning curve of that experience was recognized. It was such a hill, such a rock to push up a hill. The feature landscape as opposed to, you're shooting your short over a weekend. It's like 2 to 3 days.
It's okay that you don't sleep.
You can just you just power through it and like pure adrenaline, pure physical force to just execute. You can't do that in a feature because it's a marathon and you're relying on 100 people instead of 10 or whatever. And there were certainly lots of, we lived with the script for over like 5-6 years. You had for like 7. So I think there was so much iteration and so much connection and like relationship to every single moment of it. But the process of shooting it and how just it radically changes. I mean, it takes place in a tunnel, like we said, but it's also one of the protagonists is a 5-year-old girl. And that level of just sort of improvisation to find like the magic that was within her meant that we weren't like shooting pages like, okay, let's get this moment. It was very much these really long takes and building as much of a 360-degree environment for her to try to make it feel as authentic as possible. But it meant that, you were leaving production with some scenes where you were like, did we even get what we wanted to communicate in that scene? It was our first feature too, so we didn't have the experience to walk away from every moment and be like, got that, or like have to go reshoot that, whatever. So I think it was the weight and like size of the production was a wake up call.
I would also just like to say that we lost financing on it. We got financing, we lost financing. That was really awful.
Because we'd cast the girl, so she's aging out of the role. And we were like, want to go into production, and then lost the financing. And then like by next year, she would be too old to play in so many ways. I was 7.
We flew ourselves to LA. We got in, our agent was sent our short, the Caroline, the one that went to Cannes, and took us in before it had even gotten into a festival. So he was super instrumental in finding these other people who were potentially interested in talking and having a meeting to get financing. Another short got into Sundance. We flew ourselves out to LA. And I remember this moment in these meetings where it was so clear that these people were like, I don't know if I'm going to give you.
Yeah.
Where remember, it's just like, what will it take? What else can we do to prove ourselves? That short, Caroline, had just been shortlisted for the Academy Awards. And we were like, we have done everything you can do as short filmmakers to prove to you we can make a feature. Like, what else is there?
It's not a very like marketable feature, though, to be fair, too. It's not like a happy story. It's a very bleak topic.
Which was another big lesson, is the last third of that film becomes a thriller. And that's how we got to Caddo.
Yeah.
I thought, oh shit, this is actually where we want to live. This is our sweet spot.
Yes.
This is like the thing that we want to do. We want to turn more to genre. We want to turn more to thrillers, especially. Like, how can we keep using this and make it a fun experience for the audience and not a learning lesson?
Your Trojan horse,
if you will,
of a movie. Yeah.
No, that's a really great lesson. And you guys clearly went through it. The idea of losing financing in the middle of the movie is a real fear. That is like just awful to even imagine, because it's that, and then it's the next one is you finish your movie and they decide not to distribute it, which doesn't happen that much, but lately has been a thing. And so, you guys clearly went through the ringer to get that made, and congratulations for getting it done. And also, you didn't make it easier on yourself casting a child, so that's like a lot of work. That's a lot of work.
Yeah, these are the sort of things, though, that I think we do get excited about. It's the same thing as like, you decided to write a story that takes place on a lake with a lot of boat work and swamp work. That's going to be really tough. And it's like that was what was exciting about it. It also takes place in this tunnel underneath New York, a lot of it. And like that location was really taxing and tricky for all those variables too. But I think it lends itself towards an experience that someone hasn't had before of like what they're watching. And we like leaned into those variables, those like big unknowns. And I think we'll continue to do that because it's like an easy way to like immediately set your film apart, I guess, in some respects.
So are you stimulated by challenge when it comes to filmmaking?
We know that we're definitely driven by location, and like locations that are not
easy.
Yeah, easy. And feel just like off the beaten path. And so I guess that lends itself towards that sense of challenge. And we do every next thing you do is like a response to the previous one. So we're definitely not interested in ever like remaking the same kind of film over and over again. And so Caddo was very much a response to Topside, our first feature. Yeah. Right.
That's interesting because I wonder if we have this in common. I sometimes struggle in the early script phase with stories about I'm not able to visualize the location. Even if it's as simple as a house, I want to be able to kind of know the architecture of it and where rooms are and where hallways are, because especially in the genre space, you got people running, you got people escaping. You need to like know where these things are. So do you ever find yourself, obviously with this tunnel, or in the case of Caddo Lake, do you find yourself looking at locations either in person or online and thinking like, I think I could see a story happening here?
We filmed both locations before we really like finalized the screenplays. I mean, Caddo came from going to the actual lake and writing it for the actual locations on the lake.
Yeah.
But even something as simple as that one era when Ellie's boat goes missing. And that's, we really wanted to find a house that had kind of that circular propulsive type of thing. It was never going to work in a house where it was just like a railroad type of setup.
Right.
So that kind of stuff, we just decide. We're like, we're not looking at a house unless there's like a
flow to it.
Yeah.
After Topside, did you immediately begin thinking about the next feature, or what was life like at that time, career-wise? Were you trying to get into television or anything along those lines?
It was COVID.
Yes.
Topside the sound mix was happening the day South by was canceled, and Topside was due to premiere at South by. Yeah. Then Topside got into Critics Week at Venice, which would not have accepted it had it played at South by. So we're like, okay, that's nice. But again, there was no in-person type of thing with it. So Topside Road's Tiniest Violin was swallowed into COVID, and did not create any type of splash in our career that we hoped it would. It was almost as though we hadn't even made a first feature for a lot of intents and purposes because people were preoccupied with the pandemic.
Yeah, I just sort of stopped.
A big thing that we feel is very important is being continuing relationships, being incredibly kind to our crew, learning people's names, learning who they are, and making sure that their voices and opinions are heard. And part of that is keeping up these relationships with our producers too. One of our producers on Topside was also producing the Modern Love TV series. And he asked if we wanted to write one of like 50 scripts that was being written for consideration for season 2.
Yeah.
We wrote it, and John Carney liked it and picked ours as one of the 6. No, it was he wrote 3.
Yeah.
I think it was 6 scripts that was going to be made for season 2.
And we were already attached as directors. So our first TV job was writing and directing for an episode of Modern Love, which was really just this glorified short film because they're all these little vignettes. So we got to like cast everyone, and it was not your conventional TV experience where you're like a guest director. We sort of got to, make every decision. So it was a cool step in. It was really fun.
Just before that, we'd written kind of the first draft of Caddo. We had gone down to the lake. We'd found this photo on Reddit. So we'd written kind of like the beginnings of a first draft. Logan's mom had recently passed away, and it was kind of like a response to that. The idea of, can you really know your parents before you were born, what they were like before you were born? That was our just this kind of idea we kept playing with. So we made Modern Love, and then our agent called that Knight had watched our short Caroline, the one that went to Cannes that was shortlisted for the Academy Awards. And Knight loved it, and he wanted to talk. So we met with Knight, and it was the weirdest meeting I think we've ever had, because he was just like, "You're going to direct on my show." It was not an interview. It was like, no, this is what's happening. So that was super surreal. We moved out to Philly 2021 January, and we were still working on the third drafts of Caddo. That was the script of which was being financed by a different producer from Topside. Yeah. So it's, again, just keeping all of those relationships alive, because you try to make sure you're making work with good people. And so why would you ever lose those humans in your life? Knight has us over for lunch while we're about to direct.
He wants us to watch the first cut of the episode he directed for season 3, episode 1. So we watched it in his theater, and that's why he had us over to like the production office. And we were watching it, and it was great. And then we're literally like leaving the theater, I remember. And we're talking, and he's like, "What are you guys working on? Like, will you guys have a script for like a feature or whatever?" And we did, and it was Caddo. And I don't know, I literally don't think we had ever thought about how much synergy there was between this movie and Knight and everything that he does, because it was just like, why would this ever happen? But so we were like, yes. And he was like, let me read it. And we gave it to him, not thinking he'd ever read it. But he's just being really nice. He's a very nice guy. But he read it that weekend and then had us into his office like the following week while we were like working, prepping actively on Serpent. And he starts talking about our feature again in this spirit of like,
we're doing this.
This is going to happen.
Yeah.
We're like, he's like, I really like this. And I think this is this. I mean, that was sort of the beginning of the beginning. Like, I don't know how.
We went into production that fall.
Yeah.
And that
was amazing. Wow.
So it was incredibly lucky,
So our experience, our career partially got swallowed, but we were able to resurrect it by always having something on a burner. Keep writing.
Yeah.
You never know who's going to ask.
Yeah, and like you said, maintaining relationships. Just you get a chance to meet someone new through someone you've already worked with, or you're continuing to work with someone that was a great experience to be around. And before you know it, you're directing Servant and pitching your movie, not even knowing you're pitching your movie to Knight. And so that's so exciting, and really kind of like a dream scenario, honestly. So I imagine that working with him as a producer and Blinding Edge Pictures and getting this thing off the ground having already worked on Servant, clearly he likes the script. Was this in general a pretty positive experience in the production sense of getting the time you needed to do things, cast? Obviously, you're working with some really phenomenal actors in this film who are absolutely bringing their A game. So talk a little bit about that, like the actual, production idea of shooting on a lake and all the swamp and the boat work, like you said, but making all of this work in the edit. And was it a good experience?
Working with Night and Blinding Edge, which is Ashwin and Kat and Grace and Shuni, these wonderful people he's brought together, that was incredible. Like, full stop, amazing. In a way that, oftentimes I think, like we were talking about at the beginning, I still don't feel like, big imposter syndrome, whatever. We still don't feel like we're actually filmmakers. Yeah. Like, should we even have a seat at the table with M. Night Shyamalan? The fact that he listened and responded and was able to, it will be an experience that it has fully changed us as filmmakers. The actual production, the actual the whole thing, it's crazy challenging. I have to point out here our cinematographer, Lole Meyer, and our producer, Cara Durrett. They have been with us since our very first short. Logan met Lowell on a short he was acting when Lowell was the DP and they had a bromance thing. Yeah. And then that's true. And they have come with us and we've made sure that they have their own very successful careers to their own right, their own movies they've made. But they have been our ride or dies and kept us really sane. And I think sometimes working with a director has so much, he has very strong opinions, and being able to look at each other and say but that's not the movie we're making. That's not the thing we're trying to tell here. That has been important for us to be this unified front before we go on set and do all this stuff in pre-production. But even in writing the script with Night would sometimes have an idea in a way that could veer the script much more into his type of territory. But we wanted to make sure we were hanging on to what we saw in this story and why we want to tell it, rather than just saying yes to everything. And I think part of that too was having a really strong team, which is our producer Cara and our cinematographer Lowell.
We had them come down to Caddo actually when we had the first draft of Caddo ever, because we were you have to come experience this lake. And they did, which was meant so much to us. They drove down and they read that first version and they were this is
really bad.
It's terrible.
But Cara gave it to K Period and Josh and Kimberly funded that first draft. And
yeah. But just what you're saying in terms of a no bullshit relationship, there was no icing on the cake of there was something fundamentally wrong with the first incarnation of the script. They were the only people we shared it with, and they, were able to be honest with us as friends about how it just did not work.
We think we don't know a lot of people who we give this label to. One is our composer, Dame Bloch. The other is Night. Night is a genius. Night is actually a genius. He is so eloquent. He knows the way that he can pull references. He reads all the time. The way that he can articulate and see a problem. It's something we will aspire to for the rest of our lives.
Yeah.
But Night has a very specific way of telling a story. And it's something where we never wanted to. In Servant, we were following totally in his footsteps.
Yeah.
But for this, we really wanted to make sure we hung on to our own voice as much as possible.
And to Night and Blind Ninja's credit, they were in the service of that 100%. They were only ever there as guides and to challenge us. What exactly are you saying in this moment?
Why are you saying no to this note that I'm giving you?
Yeah.
Tell me exactly why. And being forced to articulate that was something that only helped the film.
Yeah.
I met him once at a convention, and it was for The Visit, and he was super nice. And I asked him a stupid fucking question. I was like, when's The Village coming out on Blu-ray? I'll always be haunted by that.
Hopefully you'll have a redo someday soon.
Yeah, that'd be nice. I've read the book, The Man Who Heard Voices, which was someone basically tailed him while he was making Lady in the Water. And I've really paid attention to his evolution as a filmmaker as well, because this is something I've talked about with people who worked on my film. Is his way of looking at stories in the genre space is very aspirational to me, because most all of his movies have something that feels very marketable about them that general audiences can appreciate, but that there is some, whether it's some level of spirituality or some sort of very deep character study that is not commonly seen in a genre film. So he's making these movies that most people can watch, but that have these hidden things in there that are meant to sort of expand your view of the world a little bit. One of my favorite things about Caddo is on the page, it is a thriller about a missing girl. And everybody understands that. Everybody can get into that and hope that there is some resolution to it. But as it opens up and the layers peel off, and you realize that there are different timelines, that there are people who are 100% related, and all of these things are happening in tandem. I think one of my favorite things about it is something I love about, and I guess, spoilers for Final Destination 5, probably not the movie you thought I'd say, but if you've never seen that film, there's a different timeline that you weren't aware of. And when you're looking on the movie and you're seeing all of these older cars, older computers, older phones, and once you sort of realize that that's happening, it's this great feeling of, my God, that was right in front of me this whole fucking time, and I wasn't paying attention. And I just think that you guys pulled it off so well. So I'm curious, this is something I was thinking about as I was watching it. Marketing this must have been tough. The hook of the movie, as you said, is a spoiler. And so it has to be marketed, I imagine, as a thriller about a missing person. And then there's this hint of something a little Twilight Zone-y going on, and that's it. Because if you go any further, people are going to figure it out and it's going to lose the impact. What were those conversations like about actually selling this movie to people?
It was one of the first things that Knight articulated it after he read it, which made us feel like you see the same movie that we see, where he was like, you have to hold on to that, obviously, that this element of time travel. You can't, put that as part of the marketing of the film. And I think if we hadn't, like, there's a version where if we had stayed and iterated the script for another year or something, we would have found a way to maybe have there be a little more meat on the bones of the cards up aspect, to give the audience a little bit something else to feel like they were a little more story to chew off of, besides the idea that this girl goes missing. This was always the fundamental problem with the film, and it never went away. The first act was the hardest to edit, the hardest to kind of find a way to keep an audience engaged, because you're setting up so much stuff, these two different characters, it's like double the exposition. But if you go back and watch it, it's all really necessary. You need every single scene. It's not just like world building and texture, but at face value, when you're watching for the first time, that's all it feels like. And it was a real struggle. So just even outside of the marketing aspect, the experience of watching the film, we know that first act is a trying experience, and that, in our heart of hearts, there could be something else that was pulling and exciting and propulsive about the experience, where you could get to her disappearing that much faster somehow, but we could not crack that for the life of us. In prep, while we were trying to rewrite it, and then threw it into post as we iterated and tried to cut it down as much as possible. And I think it was one of the biggest things that kept the film from feeling like certain distributors thought that it could have a wider audience, was because it's such a hard sell, because you're sort of just selling tone. This idea of strange things are happening on this lake.
But also that people feel like audiences don't want to think that hard. And I think that's something we've really been seeing in, we're writing a pilot right now with a large streamer, and we're writing our next feature also with a large distributor. And it's really cool to have these studio experiences all of a sudden, where we've never had this before. Especially the pilot we're writing, this particular entity feels like the need that things have to happen immediately or people will click away.
Yeah.
It hasn't been the case with Caddo. People have watched it. It's been it's consistently been up there with one of the, it keeps rising on IMDb films. We're so grateful. We don't know how this is happening. I do think that audiences want to think. And I think that we have to give them more credit for that. To that point, that word of mouth experience, the people telling people to watch this film, can go a long way. We know that there were some offers for Caddo to have a theatrical run, but that Knight was always looking at a wide release. So he was more interested. At the end of the day, box office numbers are a really big deal to Knight, even more than critics. He is about box office numbers and the audience. That's his thing. Mm-hmm. And so I think taking that pressure off of the movie, where he didn't feel that we had a cards up, was something that really felt for him that it should go a streaming route. there's always going to be a part of us that will be sad that it never, had that chance to have that theatrical run. We're just starting our careers, and we know that there are issues, and I don't know. What is a movie if you don't have regret, right? Like, what is an artistic experience if you don't have like massive regret at the end of it? But also just like, hopefully in a couple of years can step back and be like, no, it's good.
I love how humble you guys are. You're very, very self-aware. I think the best filmmakers are. I just greatly appreciate that in hearing these stories. But I firmly believe that a movie like yours is going to just, the fan base is just going to keep growing. And with movies like that, there are always things called revival screenings. So I wouldn't be surprised if 5, 6, 10, 15, these anniversary thing, like get a screening together. Like I'll host one. I'll try to make it happen one day. Like we'll all just have like a big Caddo Lake screening. And I agree, there is something really exciting about the theatrical experience. But at the same time, there's also something really exciting about genuine discovery. And that's something that is very much so a streaming thing. Like you can just show the random movie that pops up and you're like, what's this? And you watch it and you're just swept away by it. And I think that's something that's what Caddo did for me. Like, again, I saw it pre-streaming, but I'm going in with no expectations. And it's one of the reasons why I don't always do this anymore, because I started as a film critic, but I've completely kind of just, left that behind and focusing on filmmaking. I was like, I'm going to post this review like when the embargo lifts, because I want to be one of the first people to tell people to watch this, like before it comes out. That's just the way it works. And I think that it's just going to keep growing for you. And on the point of clicking away, I've had meetings with various streamers about this very thing. I've got like 7 or 8 spec scripts that I'm in a various state of, trying to get my next thing off the ground. And had a meeting with one of the prominent streamers. And that was almost the entire topic of the meeting, was like, do you have something that basically starts on page 1 and never stops? And I'm like, yeah, I do. I got a couple of those. But like, let me ask you a question though. Like, what do you mean by stop? Like, what is that? Like, when you say it never stops, what do you mean really? Because I think that's this weird viewpoint. Like, I mean, I'm a big fan of Speed. I think it's one of the greatest movies ever made. That's a movie that never stops, sure. But like, I also look at movies like yours and I think to myself, I'm very invested from the beginning, because these characters are making choices that make me think, and it's engaging my brain. And so, are they running away from a tornado? No, but that doesn't matter because I'm engaged. Or like a scene where Dylan O'Brien is in his partially constructed house that was just sitting there, and they're having like playtime with like where the kitchen would be. That's a really beautiful scene where characters are able to flourish and you're able to like feel a world that could have happened that didn't. And that kind of stuff is engaging to me. And I agree. I do think people want to think, and they want to be, at the end of the day, especially with TV, like, and not that this is a TV movie, it's a feature film, but like when people are watching stuff at home, they're getting engaged with characters. That keeps them going. Like, again, Speed, as good of a movie as Speed is, if I didn't love Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock, it wouldn't be the same. Like, there's something that they brought to that nonstop experience that I think your movie does too, where I am just like instantly on the side of these characters because I feel like I know them. It's interesting, and I agree with you, and I'm sorry I'm talking a lot.
No,
No.
please.
I agree with you about the way it feels when you watch your movie. You're just going to see all the flaws that you have. You're going to see all the shots you wish you were able to get, or, the way a moment looked in your head that you weren't quite able to achieve, whatever. Other people aren't experiencing that the same way that we are when we look at our things. So when you're looking at the first act of your movie as this thing that your quote was, it was never going to be exactly what it had to be. I felt none of that while watching it. And it wasn't just because I was interested in the idea of where did this girl go? Oh, I hope she's okay. I wanted to know what the significance of Dylan O'Brien's mother's death was. I wanted to know the significance of why Eliza Scanlon's character is so bitter about her family, and all those things were always in the back of my head. And so once it starts to get cool or whatever. It was just like icing on the cake. So again, more praise, but be proud of yourselves, man. You guys made a really damn good movie. And I do think that it's just going to keep growing as a fan base. And I also think that it's the perfect thing that a movie like this should have. It's the same thing that a movie like Lake Mungo got, where it's like the right people notice it, the right people watch it. And those people say, hey, you need to watch this. And before you know it, the entire conversation around your movie is just people supporting it. And you're not going to get that if you just throw it in the theater and hope that people are going to go see it. You know what I mean? Like, this groundswell happens from people discovering it, which is, again, why I'm talking to you guys. I want more people to watch it.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, it's honestly, it's been a long time coming too, because we shot it a few years back in the strikes, and
we had 2 children.
Had 2 children since we made it. So there's been a delay. And like you're saying, that idea of, experiencing all the regrets when you're watching it, we had some distance from the film when we sat down to watch it again at the premiere event, in the theater with all the cast and crew. And it was very, very rewarding because, all those edit points and all the like weird last minute changes and like VFX that you were just like trying to overhaul, and all the like pain and pressure from post has kind of faded, somewhat in memory, that I was like certainly able to like watch it and with like fresh eyes, so to speak, a little bit. And I was like, oh yeah, like it works.
We're proud of it.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, no, I mean, so proud for him. Also just like an execution level when it comes to what the cast and crew were able to do. Because, we just wrote it and then like asked all of these impossible things of our collaborators, and the fact that nobody got hurt making this movie, and that the performances are as good as they are, and that we're able to showcase some of these places on this lake and like call attention to this beautiful location is, I'm really, really happy with it.
It's also just briefly about like the idea of trying to pay some sort of homage to the lake itself without kind of, the lake has so much history, and it's like, how far back do we go? Do we show them interacting with dinosaurs on the lake or native? Like how, and that was Night's big thing too, is like, what's the origin? And then the idea of being able to say like, what if we could make a time travel movie where the time travel itself is not being controlled by someone else? And that took a while to kind of wrap our heads around. So there were a lot of things that we felt like, oh, we haven't quite seen this in a time travel movie before. Of course, we watched all of those incredible time travel movies, and like things like Predestination, of course, Dark, the German television series, and the Back to the Futures, and trying to make sure that we were, or even Coherence, something like Coherence. Yeah. We're trying to make sure that we're, paying homage while still like trying to be true to this thing that we were telling. This idea where we're starting with 2 timelines, like you mentioned, that you're not aware of, and this idea that there's no puppet master. Like, what if this family gets just caught in this linear knot where there are not multiple like worlds or timelines? It feels cool to have our little piece be added into that awesome, like section canon time travel pieces, and be like somewhat accepted by this really daunting community of people who's like always looking for a hole. We were trying, to Derek Ciafrance or Jeff Nichols. There were big people were thinking what if Place Beyond the Pines was a time travel movie? Like, what if that was kind of the place we started? And it did. I still get goosebumps when he steals the car from Celeste. It's that thing of the people in your life who have died. I have one friend who passed away a few years ago, and I think I see her on the street all the time. And that's what we wanted to do, is these like little tropes about death, seeing a ghost, or this wish fulfillment of someone who died young. But what if you could see that they'd grown up and had a good life even without you? And that those still kind of worked when we rewatched it for the first time for the first time after many months at the premiere.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was cool.
There's a moment near the end of the movie where she touches the scar on her face, the scratches on her face, and you're like, oh, okay, she got it. No dialogue, just reactions, great performances, and that was a really nice touch. it's great to hear filmmakers who are proud of their movie. You know, we're all going to have the same regrets of, you know, what if we did this? What if we did that? But you guys really have achieved something great. You're self-starters, you know, like you said, you were directing commercials and learning from YouTube, which is a whole new world. I mean, there's this thing that I do think is going to go away in the coming years. This sort of, I don't know if stigma is the right word, but like this, like, oh, well, this person came from YouTube and now they're making movies, or this person did this and now they're making movies. We're living in a world now where like next generation filmmakers are all going to have some kind of digital footprint of some kind. I just think it's so great that this movie is finding its audience, and that obviously that Knight saw something in it too. And I'm like officially a huge fan of you guys. I can't wait to see what you do next. And thank you for making this movie.
Thanks
Thanks,
for
Chris.
having us.
This has been a lot of fun. Yeah,
Yeah.
really appreciate it.